So this is a great development. It's something I've been talking about from the beginning of the conflict, which is after we froze Russian funds around the world, and some of those funds are frozen here in the US, but most of them are frozen inside Europe, that we should think about creative ways to use those funds to support Ukraine. The reason it's such a good, positive development is because, one, it provides more assets and funds to support Ukraine, but also it's highly coercive towards Russia, because one thing for Russia to have this money, which is its money, frozen around the world where it can't access the money. It's another thing for Russia to have to think about the fact that it's now losing money, that the money that it has frozen could be reduced. Now, keep in mind, the first decision to use this money was to use the interest off of the approximately 300 billion that's frozen around the world. That interest will support loans, and those loans will be given to Ukraine. But this is the first step, right? And this means that all of that $300 billion is potentially subject to forfeiture and to be used to support Ukraine. And I really applaud that effort, the changes to the law and to policy that were made by the US and the European countries who just recently accomplished this. And it's an absolutely amazing development, and one that I think sends a message to the world that if you're an authoritarian leader and you engage in human rights abuses and you violate international law, your money, wherever it is around the world, could be frozen and you could forfeit that money.
Let's cover also Ukraine's legal actions against Russia around the globe. I know that you have been helping this effort for Ukraine around the globe. Could you please give us some insight into this long-term battle against the Russian side in the courtrooms around the globe?
Well, I think one thing that Ukraine has done, which I also applaud, is it's taken action to try to set up a victim fund for those whose lives have been affected, who've lost their homes, who've lost loved ones inside Ukraine because of Russia's illegal war. And they're setting up a victims fund, setting up a process to compensate those victims. Also, Ukraine has been active in trying to enforce sanctions to locate the assets of oligarchs who support Russia and support the Russian regime, to get those frozen, to try to get those forfeited. So those are some of the legal actions. And there is a kind of legal battle going on around the world, and Ukraine is making progress on that front as well.
Also, we have seen some reports from the US Department of Justice. It seems like they went after Russian oligarchs around the United States. What is your take on that, and could they do even more?
So there's a kleptocracy unit inside the Department of Justice, and they are focused on using remedies in the U.S. law that actually existed before the invasion of Ukraine by Russia to confiscate assets of those who have supported, who have helped violate U.S. sanctions, so violate U.S. law. And so the Department of Justice is actively finding assets of oligarchs, freezing them and confiscating them, which is also a really positive thing for Ukraine. It's highly coercive to anyone who wants to support Putin and wants to have assets outside of Russia and wants to be able to travel outside of Russia. And it shows that the Department of Justice is sending a signal to those who support Putin and support the Russian regime around the world that if the U.S. authorities and U.S. law can reach you, we can get jurisdiction over you, you will likely be punished. You may lose your assets, and that's a really good thing, and it's also helpful for Ukraine.
Do you also see any plans for Biden-Harris administration to move forward with tackling the sanctions evasion by the Russian side, by Russia and its allies?
I do. I think that will be part of the review that happens right after our election. I do think that the Biden administration and President Biden will think about how to make sanctions tougher, how to do a better job of enforcing sanctions. And then if Harris is elected, leading into the Harris administration, where they kind of do a full review of the Ukraine policy, I think economic measures will be looked at very closely. We have sanctions that we put on Russia. We also have bans on companies providing certain types of equipment, technology to Russia, and there needs to be even better enforcement. I do think the U.S. has done a good job of enforcing these restrictions on supplying technology to Russia, but I think there needs to be even more enforcement, and maybe we need to tighten it even more. Ultimately, Russia is only going to back down when it is hurt militarily and it is hurt economically, and we need to do more to hurt it economically. And I'd also say that we need to review the price cap on sales of Russian oil and gas, and maybe readjust that as well, to make sure that Russia is feeling the full force of punishment when it tries to sell its oil and gas around the world, that it's selling for a much lower price than the market price. And so we need to find ways to hurt the Russian economy where the most revenues are generated, which is the oil and gas industry in Russia.
Thank you, David, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Herom Slava.